Well, I'm currently, I would guess you would call an independent historian and an archivist. I am working not only on just the seizure of cultural goods, and not only by the Nazis, because unfortunately, right after the war, you have a counter-seizure in the Eastern Front. Yeah. And that was where I started with my investigations in what I would call broadly displaced cultural treasures from the Second World War. But it involves, in many cases, things that have ended up on the Eastern Front in the former Soviet Union. Were twice seized, first by the Nazis and then by the Soviets. And so we're dealing with some very complicated migration, and one publisher kept wanting me to write it up in terms of plunder, counter-plunder, but I think that sounds a little almost too ominous. But Alfred Rosenberg had been appointed in 1934 as Hitler's ideological henchman, so to speak, in charge of ideological work for the Nazi Party, not for the state. It was a party position that he held. And he himself was born in Estonia. But he had come during the revolution, or during the Russian Revolution, and when the German army had arrived, when Estonia became independent, he fled to Germany, and so got started there. The Einsatzstab Rosenberg was I would call it an operational adjunct to his office of this position that he held as ideological French henchman, which he turned into an office with the German abbreviation DBFU. But it didn't start until or it wasn't organized, should I say, until the invasion of France in June of 1940. And one of his office directors from Berlin was sent immediately to Paris on the heels of the invading armies, and he found all these abandoned Masonic materials in lodges in Paris and reported back. And Rosenberg immediately decided, or they immediately decided, that they needed to have an operational unit to collect all of these materials for a projected, what he called the Hochschule, a university-level training ground for the Nazi elite. And that was to be built after the war on the Chiemsee in Bavaria. But during the war, they were busily collecting as many archival materials and library materials from what he called the enemies of the regime, namely the foreign part of it, in his conception of the Judaic Masonic Bolshevik conspiracy, and so that their main enemies were first Jews and Masons and East European emigres in the West before the invasion of the Eastern Front. So that gives you a little idea of what it is. And then from France, it spread quickly to all subsequently occupied countries, and they were immediately working in Greece and of course after Paris, Belgium and the Netherlands on the Western Front. Yeah. Well, for Belgium, and I say I'm just so pleased that I got into this project with Michel Vermont at the Amsab, whom I have known since he was involved with his former director, helping to arrange the return of the Belgian archives that were discovered in Moscow, because this was my introduction to this whole area of inquiry, because I happened to, quite by chance, to be the one that discovered the French archives in Moscow, not discovered the archives themselves, but discovered reports about their seizure by Soviet archival units. And the story broke with an interview with me in a Russian newspaper October 19, or the interview started in October 1990, but it took the journalist a year to be allowed to publish this story, and it wasn't until after the August coup in August of 1991 that the story appeared in October. And of course he had to verify that what happened, because at first none of my archival colleagues in Moscow even knew that these archives were still in the Soviet Union. And the French archivists who I knew, with whom I was in contact, also, they suspected they might be someplace, but they knew nothing in detail. And so this is really how I got started in all of this. But for what's new now about for Belgium is that I happen to the same year, I also happen to have discovered or identified the largest collection of files from the Einsatzstab Rosenberg that happened at that time to be in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, in Kiev archives, because I just finished a directory of Kiev archives that was to be entitled Ukrainian archives in the Soviet Union, but the year afterwards there was no Soviet Union. And so, but in any case, what we're doing now with the Belgian, what we found with the Belgian chapter is that because some of the, or not some, I think a significant part of the records of the Belgian ERR unit from when it was established in August of 1940 through March 1943, when they were carrying out these confiscations, these records had been sent out from Belgium and not destroyed, as was the case in many others, and not hidden, as was the case of some of the ones in Amsterdam. But and so that what we found, and it's only recently with this project that we've put together that the document about the shipment of 4 crates of Belgian records to the castle of Nikolsburg, which at that time was part of the Sudeten territories that were annexed to Austria, and hence part of the Reich. But they were reverted to Bohemia, where they belonged, right after the fighting stopped. But what was interesting, apparently, the Germans decided not to destroy, or the ERR decided not to destroy these records when, thank goodness, when the Red Army was approaching, because this was an area that, in Czechoslovakia that was all liberated by the Red Army, but they shipped them west. And apparently that was where Ukrainian, one of Khrushchev at that time was head of the party in Ukraine, and he had his own trophy scouts and his own archival scouts. And these were among the records, and I found the reports in Kiev about their return from Dresden to Kiev in the fall, I think around October of 1945.
Okay, and then...
And so this is one of the sort of innovations that we have now, is trying to understand these records, which were never put in order and processed by the Soviets, and the Ukrainians weren't willing to do so before they went online from Kiev, because the Ukrainians were not willing to give these back to Germany as the Dutch had done with the ERR records they found. And so they're all just helter-skelter, many of them, I would say not all, but many of them are helter-skelter in terms of archival processing in Kiev, and this is the way they were filmed, not filmed, digitized, because they were also filmed, but they were digitized, and for the internet use. And I, again, happen to have been involved in that project because it was one of my Kiev archival colleagues who was in charge of the group that was receiving this digital equipment from the Kalins conference, which was sponsoring this project. And so that we could get these online. And now I am trying to, with the help of a Ukrainian colleague and with the help of Michel Vermont here, to get a proper listing of the various files that contain the Belgian documents in this collection. And this has itself been quite a project. But the other thing that I think is a new finding for Belgium is that something that I had not known before or realized, that the ERR had quite a special system in Belgium that I haven't found in any other country, that they had numbered what they called work projects, Archive Verhaven, and they where they had there were 150 numbered confiscations, and these you will find on these original ERR seizure lists and shipping lists that we are posting, that give the names and the dates and the descriptions of all of these materials, and so that it's a complete, what we have now for Belgium is a complete record of these 150 priority confiscations involving approximately, as I recall, that number, I think it was about 150 individuals, where there are 150 to get all together, about 90 individuals, or maybe it's up now to 110, and about 40 institutions. And this is what we are now presenting and analyzing. Yeah. And I'll be talking a little more about the highlights of these seizures this afternoon.
Okay, thank you for this interview.